Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Mike Levin. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brittany. Good to be with you.
Congressman, it's great to have you back, and it is really rare to see legislation that's supported by members of Congress of all political stripes. But that is true about the Restore Trust in Congress Act. A bipartisan group introduced the legislation, which would prohibit lawmakers from trading individual stocks. So to start off the conversation, talk to us about the bill. What is the legislation?
Well, the legislation is long overdue, Brittany, and it says that members of Congress should not be allowed to use the information they get as members to trade individual stocks. Members need to be focused on serving the public good, not their own pocketbook. It should be as clear as day that this is what needs to happen. And for far too long, we've seen members, frankly, it's not just one party or the other, that have used the information that they get in order to call their broker and trade, buy or sell individual shares of stock based on what they think is going to happen. But we as members of Congress, in order to do our jobs effectively, represent our communities, we have access to material non-public information that we get, whether it's, clear example was the pandemic, when we heard about what was happening, even if just a day before the general public or a couple days before the general public, you could use that and you could gain financially on that basis. Just the same, there's been a lot of reporting out there about members that may have had advance notice of what President Trump was going to do with regard to tariffs and how you could potentially use that for personal gain. So again, it's not a left or right thing. It's just a right versus wrong thing. And I'm encouraged to see that Speaker Johnson has said he is supportive. Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House Democrats, has said he's supportive. And I think most importantly for the political moment we're in right now, President Trump has said he supports this. He supports banning members of Congress from trading individual shares of stock. So we reintroduced this or really launched it again on a bipartisan basis. It's not a new idea, but I think it has unprecedented momentum. And it started with 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats, myself included. So the 16 of us is all the first on this bill. And right now, the key is getting more Republicans and Democrats on board. So I'm going to do everything I can to talk to all the members I know to get them on board, because again, this is so long overdue. And it should be common sense. It really should be common sense.
Congressman, I hate to ask a question that seems so basic and so obvious, but how is this not already illegal? Because from what you're describing, it sounds like insider trading. You hear something from a private hearing. You hear something in conversations privately on the floor of the House, the floor of the Senate. You call your broker and you make moves. That sounds and smells like insider trading. So to start off the conversation even more so, how is this not already illegal?
Yes, here's the rub, Brittany. Technically, it is illegal. The problem is that the law is something called the Stock Act, which passed in 2012, and it is completely toothless. Basically, if and when you are shown to have violated the rules, which is to say that you either used the non-public information or that you traded and didn't disclose the trade, you get like a $200 fine. You get a slap on the wrist. So a lot of members of Congress say, well, what's the point? And that's, honestly, just completely unsustainable. So I have come to the conclusion after a lot of discussions with my colleagues, both parties, that, one approach could be just to dramatically increase the penalties under the Stock Act and the reporting requirements, all the rest of it. But I think the simplest, cleanest way to address this by far, is just to ban it. Ban members from being able to trade stock. They can still benefit from the stock market. They just do it with mutual funds. When my wife and I decided, because I say we, you decide when you're running for office, that is a group decision, Brittany. When my wife and I said we're going to do this, one of the things that I said was we needed to divest any individual shares of stock, put it all in mutual funds, and that's what we did. And if you have that arm's length where you're in a mutual fund, you're benefiting from the overall growth of the stock market. So I'm not saying that members of Congress can't do that. But I think that where that line is crossed and where that really that material non-public information is most significant is with regard to individual companies, individual stocks, the ability to short or to buy. All of that to me is just so obviously problematic that the clearest obvious way to fix it is to just do the ban. And it's tough to get everybody on board because people like the status quo. Members of Congress have done well with the status quo. And it's hard to break, just as it's hard to break the campaign finance laws, which are in desperate need of an overhaul as well.
I'm curious how exactly this came together, because this legislation pieces together a few different bills to make a more comprehensive act. And the lawmakers who support this bill, it's people like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congressman Chip Roy, Brian Fitzpatrick, Anna Paulina Luna, Tim Burchett. I mean, these are people all across the political spectrum. So what did those compromises really look like?
Well, it's taken a lot of time. So, this is like kind of I've been here for 7 or 8 years. This is like a 7-year overnight success. I remember when we started, we were having discussions around COVID, originally with COVID, when, we as members of Congress were all given the information about how severe the pandemic would be, what the federal response was going to look like. I called my wife and said, go to Costco and get a hand sanitizer and toilet paper. That's what I did with that information, along with, trying to figure out the right policy to get the country through it. Some of my colleagues, again, they called their brokers and they bought and sold stock on the basis of what they'd learned. And that's just fundamentally wrong. So that's when I really started thinking that we needed a ban. And I remember at the time talking to people like Abigail Spanberger about it. Abby's now running for governor of Virginia. Others that you mentioned, folks like Jonah Goose, and on the other side, you had folks like Chip Roy, very involved back then. Others that are no longer in the Congress, like Ken Buck. And so even then, it was a very wide ideological range that was interested in this. And what happened subsequent is another round of news after the tariff stuff all happened earlier this year, and the belief that there may have been some members that had access to the knowledge of what Trump may or may not do. You had Trump going on Truth Social saying today is a great time to buy, that whole thing, which I think you and I have spoken about before when it all happened. And so we all started talking again. And Abigail Spanberger had handed off the authorship of the bill, the primary author, to Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island. Of course, Chip Roy is still in the Congress. And so the two of them, Magaziner and Roy, started talking back then, along with all the rest of us. As I said, there are about 15 or so of us that have been deeply involved in all this stuff. And so we all came together, and I think getting things done in Washington is all about when preparation meets opportunity. So we've been preparing for a number of years, and now the opportunity, I think, is here, given that this is more and more supported. Having the public support of President Trump, having the public support of Speaker Jeffries and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, Speaker Johnson and Leader Jeffries, all that's important because ultimately it'll be up to Speaker Johnson to decide how to proceed. If he wants a floor vote, I'm convinced that we can pass this thing in the House, and I think it would get well over 60 votes in the Senate. The key is getting it to the floor. Getting it to the floor is the key. So the current strategy, get as many Republicans and Democrats on the bill as we can, do it Noah's Ark style, one Democrat, one Republican at a time, broaden the list of co-sponsors on the bill, and move it through the committee process, do the markup in the committee process, get it to the floor via regular order. That's certainly what we're discussing. And if that doesn't work out, folks like Anna Paulina Luna, as you mentioned, have been talking about a discharge petition. That's a different process where if the speaker refuses to bring a bill to the floor after it's been stuck in committee for 30 legislative days, not calendar days, then you can start the process of getting it heard anyway if you have a majority, or voted on anyway if you have a majority of members who have signed a petition saying move it to the floor. So we're not going to exclude any options Brittany, we're going to do everything we can to get this across the finish line as soon as possible.
And you and I talked about this back in May, and you said that it seemed like to you the only person holding this up was Speaker Johnson. And now it seems like you think he's a little more perhaps amenable to this. Do you still feel that he's holding this up? Do you think that he'll welcome this vote? What does his support or lack thereof look like to you?
Well, right now, we are going to find out because, we've reintroduced this thing and we've got a lot of momentum. And the authors and all of us have said we want to see the committee process. We want to see a floor vote via regular order. And it's up to Johnson to decide whether that happens or not. So we should know in the next, couple weeks here to see whether Johnson will do it. Now, I think everybody's focused on the government funding deadline at the end of the month. And there's no question that's going to take up the oxygen, I think, in September and October, along with the Epstein matter, because that, if there's the requisite signatures on the Epstein discharge petition, that would need to be voted on towards the end of September, beginning of October as well. So my expectations for the stock trading ban is that we're looking at, probably later in October, November into December in terms of getting the floor action that we need through the regular order, or needing to do a discharge petition. In any event, as I said to the authors, and I spoke with Seth Magaziner a little while ago, we need to get this to the floor by the end of the year. We need to get that momentum, or get the vote while the momentum is still strong.
I feel like I really could be the luckiest American in my position, because it feels like a lot of people think that there's really a lack of bipartisanship, but I'm able to find areas where people, Republicans and Democrats, can agree on. And this is one of those areas. I've talked to, before months ago, Congressman Burchett on this. Just an hour ago, I talked to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna on this. And you both sound different parties. You sound the exact same, and you're very vocal on how you're supporting a ban for lawmakers on stock trading. But Seth Magaziner, the Democrat congressman, he said that the opponents of this are vocal behind closed doors, and they're quietly vocal about this. Is that the case for you? Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And again, it's one of those things, Brittany, where if the system is working for you personally, you're reluctant to change it. So you do have members who have, traded stock for a long, long time, many of whom are doing nothing wrong, by the way. They're not using their inside information, or they have it at arm's length with a blind trust or something along those lines. And they're doing things the right way. The problem is the system is so vulnerable to abuse and to self-dealing. That it is a fundamentally broken system. And I would liken it to the campaign finance system. It's very tough to change a system that benefits those, benefits the status quo. And to ask those people that it benefits to break it and start over, that's a tough thing. But as you said, we've got people of both parties who are dedicated to this, who will not stop talking about it, and will continue to build the momentum for it. And I just wish, Brittany, that there were more people like you who took the time to do a deeper dive on the ways that we are actually working together. It probably does not surprise you to hear that there aren't very many people doing that work, so I applaud you for it.
No, I told Congresswoman Luna that if you're a person who's concerned about bipartisanship, I don't think you were at the presser yesterday, but there was a slew of the members of Congress who supported this. The fist bumping, the nice words to the colleagues. I mean, it was it was optimistic on how Congress can work together to accomplish a goal, which sounds so silly and so elementary to even say, but it was refreshing to see. But I am curious, what's next here, though, if people are quietly behind closed doors saying, well, this benefits me? I mean, is the next thing shaming these people? I know you wouldn't probably want to shame a colleague, but I mean, if someone's using COVID information, they knew about COVID or how bad it was going to be before the rest of us, and the first move that they do isn't calling the wife for more toilet paper, but instead calling their broker. I mean, that's an issue that I think people need to know. What do you say to that?
Well, first I would say I remember my wife went to our local Costco and they thought she was crazy for wanting to get Clorox wipes and toilet paper, but there you go. What I would say, first of all, you got to have more than just a press conference. So I remember a couple years ago, we had a press conference very similar, and it was Chip Roy, it was Abby Spanberger, it was Ken Buck, and a number of others on the Republican side, Democratic side. We had a great press conference, fist bumps, high fives, but then you got to have the momentum for the actual committee process, the markup, onto the floor for a vote. You got to have the support of the speaker, or to Anna Paulina Luna's point, if you can't get that done, then you got to go the discharge petition route. So it can't just be high fives and fist bumps at one press conference. I'm not going to do the high fives and fist bumps till we pass the doggone thing, and that's going to take a lot of work. I told Seth Magaziner this morning, anybody I can help with, whether Republican or Democrat, you tell me. I've developed scores of relationships across the aisle. I would love to put them to good use for this purpose. But it's tough, right? Because, ultimately, Republicans want to know that Trump supports it. And I think we'll get plenty of Democrats on board. So to the extent the president can be vocal about it, I think would be helpful.
And what are opponents saying to you? Because Congresswoman Luna said something to the effect of she's heard from her own colleagues that she could be tanking the midterm. She could be tanking the election. Essentially, if she supports this, she could be getting members to vote for something that they don't want to vote for. She's been getting all kinds of, I don't want to say threat, might be too harsh of a word, but that's the type of rhetoric that's been kind of thrown her way from her own colleagues. Have you received anything like that?
Not really. I look at it this way. Congress as an institution has really lost the trust and confidence of the public to the point where, you ask people, do you have a positive or negative view of Congress? And it's, down in the teens, right? And here is an issue that is so overwhelmingly popular with the American people. One poll I saw had it 86% of Americans think we should do this. So how could it be put any of us at an electoral disadvantage? It would be good for the entire institution. It would begin to restore public trust and confidence, and it would be a winner. It wouldn't be a winner for Republicans or Democrats. It would be a winner for the institution and for everybody who comes to Washington, D.C. to serve their community rather than just to line their pockets. So that's how I would respond to that, and it's disappointing to hear that she's hearing that from colleagues, because I think really the opposite is true.
And what do you think's next for this? Because I know lawmakers have said that they're getting this on the floor one way or another. Do you think it will go to the point where you'll need a discharge petition? What does that look like for you?
Well, I think the question for Speaker Johnson is how many co-sponsors does he need to feel that this has enough momentum where he can go through the regular committee process, and that means getting the bill, amended in committee and allowing other members to weigh in, taking a committee vote, sending that product to the floor for the full consideration of the House of Representatives. That's what I'd like to see happen. And, is the number 20, 30, 40 members of both sides? So if you had 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats, would that do the trick? Or 30 of both, 40 of both? So knowing what that number is, I think, is really important. And, that's a conversation that Seth and Chip are having with one another. Ultimately, Chip needs to get that number from the speaker. And then if we hit that number and Speaker Johnson doesn't allow a vote to proceed, then you go the discharge petition route. The challenge there, as I mentioned, is getting to 218. And I know in the last Congress, the Spanberger-Roy effort, I think we were up to like 80 co-sponsors or 90 co-sponsors. I think if you added up all the stock trading ban bills, and you did away with the overlap. So I co-sponsored all of them, right? So I think you might have maybe 80 or 90 members that have consistently co-sponsored this effort. That's not enough for a discharge petition. You need people to proactively, not just to vote for it, but to say, we're going to go around the speaker and demand a vote on this. Right, and that's what's happening with the Epstein resolution from Massey and Khanna. That's the kind of thing that you'd need for this. It's only worked successfully a couple times ever, because it would require members of the majority to do an end around their own leadership. And I think a lot of people are reluctant on their side. And frankly, when we have the gavels on ours, to go around leadership in that manner.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for here. And as we see developments on this or breaking news, I hope you can come on and break it down with me. Congressman Mike Levin, thank you for your time today. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Brittany. Happy to do it.